The rules of the game change yet again. But what if this time you just don't care? Welcome to Uranus Fatigue, next on Horoscope Highlights. Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. But before we begin this week, I would like to tell you about my upcoming workshop, Ruling Planets for Unruly Times. Now, this is a workshop that I've wanted to teach for years. I've wanted to be able to share with you all the history and the background of each of the planets that we work with in astrology, whether it's the ancient planets or the modern ones. It's also something that I wanted to do in response to many of the questions that I've gotten from all of you about if I could give a sort of deep reading of the Sun or a deep reading of Venus to talk about the planets, their cultural backgrounds, and the myths that are associated with them. This is something that I will be doing in a 3-week course. That is pre-recorded. Pre-recorded so we can show you all the incredible art, illustrations, comic book strip pictures that depict the planets throughout the centuries that they have been around. It's a very different way of looking at the planets and a very in-depth view of what they are about. What I also love about this 3-week course is that once you pay for it, you can watch this at your leisure and it remains like a wonderful volume on your bookshelf, something that you can reference time and time again. As I said, the course debuts on May 11th. And as a bonus to this course, you will also get an excerpt from my book, Ruling Planets, free of charge. The course costs $197, and that's for access to the course. And again, as I said, it is a lifetime access. So this is something that you can return to time and time again. If you are interested, you can enroll at astrologyhub.com/rulingplanets. Again, you can enroll at astrologyhub.com/rulingplanets. I am so looking forward to seeing you all in class. Now, let's talk about this week's horoscope highlight, which will be focusing on the Sun-Uranus conjunction taking place on May 9th. We all know that Uranus is the planet of revolution and change. It's the first of the modern planets, discovered in 1781, and at the midpoint between the American War for Independence and the French Revolution. Indeed, Uranus's reputation comes from the fact that when it was discovered, it overthrew the traditional order of the 7 ancient planets: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Now, there was a new planet on the block, and that planet was Uranus. Now, Uranus in your chart will always talk about the areas of life that can become unexpectedly volatile. If it's triggered by a planet that's next to it in your horoscope, or a planet that happens to be transiting over the point, it's kind of like living near the San Andreas fault. All of a sudden, the earth starts to tremble, everything begins to shake, and all of those fixtures in your life are upended and turned over upside down. Now, Uranus by transit can also be as powerful, if not in some regards more powerful, all right? Uranus right now is in the zodiac sign of Taurus, the sign of the bull. Uranus first entered the zodiac sign of Taurus on May 15th, 2018. All right, this is probably a time that many people born in the early days of Taurus will remember, as well as people born in the early days of Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. There was a lot of upheaval at that period of time. And as I have mentioned earlier, I believe it was last week, a modern planet is most powerful when it enters a sign, and then again when it exits. So Uranus's entrance on 2018 was very, very powerful. Then it retrograded back out and re-entered, I believe it was around January of 2019. Now, this is something that's important to keep in mind as we talk about Uranus's placement. Uranus is co-ruler of the zodiac sign Aquarius, all right? When it was discovered, astrologers assigned it co-rulership of Aquarius along with Aquarius's ancient ruler, Saturn, all right? So Saturn and Uranus are two planets you always want to keep your eye on whenever you're looking at transits that Uranus is engaged in. So when Uranus entered the zodiac sign of Taurus in 2018, causing great upheaval for people born in the early days of the fixed signs, that wasn't really the effect it had on everyone. Saturn at that time happened to be in the zodiac sign of Capricorn, so Uranus was actually entering into a trining type of energy with the earth signs, and indeed the earth signs Virgo and Capricorn, as well as the water signs Cancer and Pisces, actually rather benefited from Uranus entering into Taurus, especially in the years of 2019 and 2020. That was a period of time when Saturn was in Capricorn and it was forming a trine to Uranus in Taurus. And you even had Jupiter going through Capricorn at that time too. And there we actually saw great gains made in the areas of Earth. Earth deals with health and wealth. And there were great gains being made in the stock market. There was a lot of money that was exchanging hands, and people were in good health at that period of time. They were in good health until Saturn changed zodiac signs. So Saturn was in Capricorn. It's an earth sign, the sign of health and wealth. But then on March 23rd, 2020, Saturn changed zodiac signs and it entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius, the sign that it rules. Now, I don't know if you remember that far back, but March 23rd, 2020, when Saturn entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius, was about 8 days after lockdowns against COVID began in the United States of America. Okay, those lockdowns came 8 days earlier, and what you had basically was a total lockdown of all activity, business activity, social activity. In essence, Saturn had entered Aquarius, a sign known for fraternizing and enjoying company and groups of people. And Saturn, being the cosmic spoiler that it can be at times, sent everyone to their rooms in lockdown until this illness was over. So the COVID outbreak, there's a whole long astrological background as to why it takes place, but it's pretty much mixed up with Pluto and Mars. But anyway, the COVID outbreak was a negative downturn in terms of health. And with Saturn's entrance into Aquarius, it was followed by a negative downturn in wealth as well. When Saturn entered Aquarius, it was forming a square, which made it combative. Okay, squares are combative energy. Trines are good and fostering. Okay, we saw a fostering of health and wealth when Saturn was trining Uranus. Okay, in that first part from 2018 to about 2020. And then it switched. It switched on March 23rd, 2020 to a square. And this introduced conflict, and this introduced difficulty and trouble, stress. And this is something that we all suffered not only through economic loss, but through personal and private loss of family members, of friends, of colleagues, of people who were near and dear to us. Many, many people, too many people died of COVID, and many, many people suffered from other effects of COVID, which was exhaustion, which was depression, which was isolation. And again, this was symbolized in the square that Saturn was making once it had entered Aquarius. Now, the thing that I want you to keep in mind is that when Saturn entered Aquarius, there was a change of rules, okay, that took place. Freedoms were being curtailed, and people had very, very strong reactions for that. Some people were like, well, this is what we need to do in order to get through this ordeal together. And other people were like, no, this is not what we need to do. It's not taking into account our lives and our mental health and our emotional health. And other people were like, it's not taking into account our political rights. This isn't the way the country should be run. So we had this radical change in rules, which of course is to be expected with Uranus forming a square to Saturn. Uranus is often associated to revolution and change. It is revolution and change. And Saturn is about maintaining the status quo. And here the two were in open conflict. Now, although Saturn retrograded, that means moved backwards. So you can think of retrograde or backed down, moved back down into Capricorn in July of 2020. The seeds of rebellion and protest had already been planted. George Floyd's murder took place in May 2020, during that period of time when Saturn was in the early degrees of Aquarius and now squaring the energy of Uranus in Taurus. And it's during that time that George Floyd's tragic death takes place, and this inspires an extraordinary social movement, which also manifested as rebellion and protest and discussions, a huge referendum over the way that the police force was being run in this country and the way that the country was being run. All right, so this was fueled during this period of time. Saturn retrograded back down into Capricorn in July of 2020. But as I said, Saturn's entrance into Aquarius had already planted the seeds, so that when Saturn re-entered Aquarius in late December of 2020, you have in January 6th of 2021, the January 6th riot, also aligned with the time that Saturn is in the early degrees of Aquarius and forming that square to Uranus in Taurus. So again, we had another rule change. We had an extraordinary questioning of rules. Was Biden president? Was the democracy going to survive? People were furious and angry at lockdowns and economic loss and loss of loved ones. And it was fueling all kinds of protest and movement and anger and ricochet reactions going on around the country. So during this period of time of 2021 and 2020, you had off again, on again squares between Saturn and Uranus, in which it was difficult to determine what were the right rules to follow, what was the right direction to go in. You know, one day the pendulum was swinging in one direction. I'm going to follow this person and what's being said here. And the other day the pendulum was swinging in the opposite direction, which is, I'm tired of following that person. I don't think they know what they're talking about. I'm going to go over here. And Saturn and Uranus are the co-rulers of Aquarius. So when that Aquarian energy is triggered, particularly in a square between the two ruling planets, you swing like a pendulum between the 2 points, so that rules that were made one day were unmade the next, only to be made again, only to be unmade the next. And there was just no one really knew what to do. And there began this feeling of just like exasperation. You know, it's almost like, you know, go left, go right, go left, go right. And people just getting so very tired of it. But because the stakes were high and the intensity was so great because of the energy of these two planets, it was kept at a peak energy of outrage and protest. In March 2023, Saturn entered the zodiac sign of Pisces. And what that did is that moved us out of the square. We were under the auspices of the square technically in 21 and 22, but it really did begin in that March to July period of 2020. And so when Saturn entered Pisces in March 2023, it began to bring down the temperature of everything. Why? Saturn in Pisces is a depressant. So Saturn in Pisces is naturally going to bring down anything that's heated or feeling incinerated. All right. So it's a natural depressant in that regard in terms of emotional flare-ups and things like that. But also what was starting to happen is that Pisces sextiles the zodiac sign of Taurus. And so again, these extremes, which can be taken up in a square. Remember that it is the nature of a square. The planetary nature of a square is Mars. Okay, so any two planets that are squaring one another are having a Mars relationship to one another. And as we know, Mars is named after the god of combat and war. And so anything that's squaring is completely combative. It's irreconcilable, and they're just going at it. It's like worldwide wrestling or whatever. It's just they're body slamming one another over and over and over again. But the sextile is like the referee calling timeout. Everyone calm down. and, sort of regather yourself, recollect your senses, take a breather, take some time away. And so this is what we're beginning to experience with Saturn moving into Pisces. Now, Saturn's entrance into Pisces is the second time that Saturn has changed signs since Uranus entered Taurus in 2018. And believe it or not, there will be a third time that Saturn changes signs in 2026. It's February 2026 when Saturn will enter Aries. And thankfully, that will only last a couple of months, that sort of inharmonious aspect that will exist between Saturn and Uranus at that period of time before Saturn enters Aries. And then we have a complete changeover in everything that's going on. So what I wanted to talk to you about is really, or sort of really kind of touch base with you on is what I'm calling Uranus fatigue. All right. So at this point of the juncture, and every time Uranus conjoins the sun, which is going to be in May, right, of a year, because right now Uranus is in the zodiac sign of Taurus. So every May since 2018 has been kind of like a check-in with the planet Uranus. The first May, which is when the planet first entered the zodiac sign of Taurus, the first conjunction between the sun and Taurus was an upset. And it had very wide and profound impact and effect. Then it was followed by the May of 2019, the May of 2020. That's that sort of accelerated financial period that I was talking about, where things were, people sort of felt no matter, where people were in terms of politics or society, there was this sense of really pushing or accelerating forward. But then all of that turned, basically the car went off the road in 2020 and definitely 2021, 2022. And this is where the rules of the game changed so many times that nobody knew what rules to follow or what rules were amenable anymore. And we've even reached a point now with Saturn in Pisces in which the outrage has become completely fatigued and fatiguing. All right. Now, that sounds like I'm saying people are feeling apathetic. And no, there's no apathy to be seen. There is, however, tremendous fatigue. And I think what we can do right now to sort of take our bearings of where we are with all of these shifts and changes, this set of rule changes, again, every time Uranus and Saturn conjoin and come together, there's going to be a change in rules. What we can sort of take strength from is Taurus energy. At first, astrologers were often talking about the upset of Taurus, that Taurus is such a complacent sign. It's a sign that does what it's told. It's a beast of burden. It's all about stability and security, and it doesn't want anything interrupting that. And it's also really good with money. So, it just wants to make money and be comfortable in life. And that's pretty much all it cares about. And now let's move on to another zodiac sign, And I have to say, I'm a big fan of Taurus and Taurus energy. And there is so much more to Taurus than just what I listed. Taurus is, first of all, Venusian by nature. Its ruling planet is Venus. And so Taurus really wants to get along with everyone. It draws its boundaries and it can be territorial, but it basically wants to get along with everyone. Taurians, I've seen them so many times at work. It's like, they're kind of like, it's funny, for a sign that could be so protective of its territory, it's actually not all that defensive. You couldn't criticize a Taurus in a work situation. And oftentimes, a Taurus will listen to what you have to say. The first response is often curiosity, like, do you know of a better way to do this? And let's hear what you have to say. So they'll listen. And Taurus is actually open. It's still a fixed sign, so it's always no before yes. But Taurus is open to thinking about it. And if the criticism is constructive, they'll actually make the change. And they may even thank you for it. They probably will thank you for it. And if the criticism isn't helpful, or if the suggestion just isn't feasible, they will often smile and nod in all the right places, wait for you to leave and go back to what they were doing anyway. So there's this wonderful way of not fighting, but winning that works for Taurus. Perhaps another way of thinking about it is that Taurians are very good at choosing their battles wisely. They really do take into effect what the ultimate outcome or the ultimate result is going to be. So during this time of Uranus fatigue, not another change of the rules, not another upset in the system, not another item in the news to be outraged about. Taurus energy gives you permission to say, God, I am so over that, or I just don't feel like I can get outraged again, or when does this stop, or are we done yet? So Taurus energy gives you the permission to say those things, of not, getting caught up in the next, cycle of outrage and intolerance and yelling and screaming. Taurus is actually over it. And Taurus has gone through its changes since Uranus entered its sign, but at this point, many Taurians are kind of like finding their groove or have settled into the new groove. And that's working for them right now. And they don't really want anything upsetting it unless it's going to result in something effective. So we're kind of making a change from being outraged at the latest scandal and yelling about this and screaming about that and canceling this and, embracing, I'll never leave this, that, we're kind of making a change to the Taurian way of doing things. And Taurus has a wonderful way of bringing things to a halt. And my inspiration for this are bulls, or cattle, rather. And what a cattle can do, or what a bull can do, or what a cow can do, if it's walking through a street, is it can go and it can plant its big bull butt in the middle of the road and not move. Okay, so you can be a car and you can be like, move, move. It's not going to move. You can be an unstoppable force and say, move, move. And it's not going to move. There is such a thing as planting your butt in the middle of the road and saying no, it's not going to happen. So this isn't a time when Saturn is forming a sextile, approaching a sextile to Uranus. It's already, Saturn Pisces is already sextiling Uranus and Taurus energy. So this isn't a time to act or to act out or to be outraged again. It's a time to let developments unfold on their own. And there's great wisdom in this. There's a point where you can stir things up to such a point that everything's so agitated that it's just continuing the agitation. And when you stop stirring, or when you stop participating in these spin cycles, you can actually let developments unfold on their own. There are things that are taking place that don't need to be agitated. They don't need to be hurried along. They don't need to be yelled and ranted out. They are developments that are unfolding on their own. And you have a power here, and it's the power of no. If you don't like what you see, or if you don't like what someone's peddling, you have the power to say, nope. And that's a very strong word, nope. It lends itself to a very strong phrase, nope. I'm not doing that. And that's something that I want you to think about in the days ahead. Anytime if someone's coming at you with great urgency or great, or whatever, or they're making demands, you can say, nope, I'm not doing that. And the reason you can say this is that you have the power to bring things to a stop, to take the wind out of a blowhard's sails, and even bring higher ups to their knees. What gives you this power? What gives you this ability to say, nope, I'm not doing that, and to be heard? It lies in the reliability of Taurus. If you are practicing Taurian energy, got a Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Taurus rising sign, you just have strong Taurus in your chart, If you're practicing Taurus energy, you are a reliable person, okay? You are a reliable person to loved ones. You are a reliable person to friends. You are a reliable person at work. And what comes from being reliable is that people take you for granted, that people start adding demands to what they want from you. And as you deliver, they become happy with what you delivered. They come to rely on you. And they also feel like they get to make heavier demands on you over and over and over again, because as far as they're concerned, you are going to be there for them 24/7. You are that reliable. And this is a wonderful thing about reliable people, and it's something they don't do enough of, which is why I am encouraging you to do it now. Reliable people always come through, so that when reliable people decide to not come through, or to hold back a bit, or to pull the plug, or to say, nope, I'm not doing that, it's wonderful. Because what are the people who are relying on you going to do? Yes, they may like, oh, you've always done this. Yes, they may scream. Yes, they may yell. Yes, they may, try to get a rise out of you and things like that. But the more you just sit there in the middle of the road and refuse to budge until you want to, or they've made a case for you to, well, the more you do that, the more that you've brought everything to a full stop. And the people who've relied on you realize how much they need you, how much they perhaps need you more than you need them. That's a prerogative. That's a privilege. That's something you get to do when you have been such a reliable person. And it's an incredibly powerful statement. No, I'm not going to do that. Sometimes it's inaction rather than action that gets you the results you seek. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Horoscope Highlights. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Your support means a lot. See you